David Shipp was a man who had spent most of his life in the American West, trapping and trading fur. He was a skilled outdoorsman, accustomed to the dangers of the wilderness. David Shipp was no stranger to the dangers of the wilderness. His father, a seasoned trapper like himself, had been mauled by a bear while out in the wild doing the same kind of job. David grew up hearing stories about his father's ordeal and the courage it took to survive such a brutal attack. Those stories instilled in David a deep respect for the wilderness and the animals that lived there, but also a sense of determination to succeed in the same line of work. In 1889, he found himself in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, transporting a load of valuable pelts to market. On this particular day, a massive tree had fallen and blocked the road that he usually used. To make matters worse, it was said that a blizzard was going to come in that day, so David had to make a choice between going back and not being able to trade versus taking a shortcut that he had no experience with. He decided to take the shortcut because he really needed to make a few trades that day. David's only fear was getting lost, having gone a path that he had never taken before, but as a seasoned trapper and outdoorsman he was able to convince himself that he would be able to find his way no matter what. He also didn't have any fear of predators or wild animals because he was a skilled marksman as well and brought along his prized rifle. As David made his way through the snow-covered wilderness, all was quiet until he heard a rustling in the bushes behind him. He turned around and not a second later saw a massive grizzly bear charging at him completely unprovoked. He knew that he was in grave danger and acted fast. David quickly raised his rifle and fired at the bear, but the animal was too quick and powerful. The bullet did little damage. It slammed into him with incredible force, knocking him to the ground and sending his rifle flying into obscurity in the bushes. It began tearing into him with its sharp claws and teeth, ripping away at his thick clothing. The bear's powerful jaws clamped down on David's shoulder, and he could feel the animal's teeth slowly tearing into his skin and muscle even on top of the thick hides that he was wearing. The bear's attacks were swift and sudden. The swipes of its paws that tore flesh and clothes like paper, its jaws snapping as if they could crush rock, and its immense weight crushing the breath out of David were enough to put pure terror in David Shipp's heart. David fought back with all his might, punching and kicking at the bear's face and body in a desperate attempt to ward it off. But the bear was relentless, its powerful jaws clamping down on David's arm with a bone-crushing force that left him screaming in agony. Blood spurted from his wounds, soaking his clothes and staining the earth beneath him as the bear continued its brutal assault. David knew he had to do something, anything, to survive this deadly encounter. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, he managed to grab hold of a nearby branch and ram it into the bear's mouth, causing it to let go and roar in either agony or rage. Gasping for breath and bleeding profusely, David struggled to get to his feet, knowing that his only chance of survival was to somehow escape the bear's grasp and make a run for it. He tried to run, but in his battered state he could do nothing more than hobble. Unfortunately, he had lost a lot of blood as well, and it weakened him to the point where he collapsed. As he did, the bear approached him again and grabbed him by the arm and dragged him a few feet away. The bear's attack left David in a state of shock and disbelief as he felt himself being dragged across the ground, his body bouncing off rocks and tree roots. The bear's grip on his shoulder was like a vice, and David could feel his bones crunching beneath the immense pressure. His arms felt weak and his mind was clouded with fear. Suddenly, the bear stopped dragging him. He thought to himself that the attack was finally over. But in a surprising turn of events it lifted him off the ground as high as it could, its massive jaws clamping down on his leg. David cried out in agony as the bear shook him back and forth like a toy, his screams echoing through the forest. It then violently slammed him down on the ground. David heard a crack in his lower body and immediately knew the slam had broken a rib. It grabbed him again, but this time by the torso, and it looked like it was about to try and slam him again. David tried to fight back, but he was no match for the massive bear. The animal was relentless, continuing to maul him with ferocity, flailing him around like a toy and slamming him to the cold ground. The bear's claws raked across his chest and face, leaving deep gashes and puncture wounds. David could feel the hot breath of the bear on his face as it growled and snarled, trying to finish him off. David knew that a bear's nose was quite sensitive, so he tried to use his leg to kick it as hard as he could in the nose. This seemed to have stunned the beast as it decided to back off. Unfortunately, it only backed off for a few seconds and then decided to continue its assault, this time biting down very hard on David's leg and shaking very hard. As blood spurted out and David screamed in agony. He soon began to lose feeling in his leg. He knew that he had to keep fighting if he wanted to survive. Despite the bear's overwhelming strength, David refused to give up. He knew that he had to keep his wits about him if he was going to have any chance of survival. With blood streaming down his chest and arms and pain racking his body, he tried to stay as still as possible, hoping that the bear would lose interest and move on. But the bear wasn't finished with him yet. It started biting into his leg, tearing through his pants and sinking its teeth into his flesh. David screamed in agony, but he knew that he couldn't let the bear get the better of him. He tried to push the bear away, but it was too strong. David's world narrowed to the pain and terror of the moment. He could feel his strength ebbing away as the bear continued its savage attack. He thought about his family, his wife and children, and how much he still had to live for. He knew that he couldn't give up, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled determination, David summoned all of his strength and fought back with everything he had. He kicked and punched the bear with his good leg and swung his arms, trying to strike the animal's head. Miraculously, his efforts seemed to have an effect. The bear suddenly broke off its attack and lumbered away into the forest. As it did, David saw a cub emerge from some bushes and follow the beast. David was badly injured, with deep gashes and broken bones, but somehow he managed to crawl to safety and summon help. He was eventually found by a group of other trappers who were passing through the area. By the time they came across him, he was completely passed out and starting to freeze. They rushed him to the nearest town for medical treatment. Days turned into weeks as David lay in a hospital bed, fighting for his life. His injuries were severe, and it seemed like he might never fully recover. But he refused to let the bear defeat him. He used his time in the hospital to reflect on his life, and eventually he made an extremely miraculous recovery. He was never able to walk the same again, however, after the ordeal, but was just glad that he was able to survive a bear attack and recover from such numerous injuries. David emerged from the hospital a changed man. He had a newfound appreciation for the fragility of life and the importance of being vigilant. From that point on, he never traveled in the wilderness alone. Over the years, David Ship's story became a legend among the mountain men and trappers of the West, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of nature's raw power. He may have been scarred and battered by the bear, but he emerged from the experience stronger and more determined than ever.